the old guy, and this is Still River Radio. And this is an unusual December 27th. It's in the mid-50s, nice and warm out. In a couple of days, it's gonna the winter cold front's gonna blow through. So this is unusually warm weather. And well, I have a history of Still River. Back during the Revolutionary War, there was the burning of Still River, which happened sometime around April 21st. But the real story of it begins in January, a warm January. And it has to do with the burning of Still River and why and what was the reason for it. And in history books it said they burned Danbury to the ground, which I call Still River, and the British did. For what reason? Well, they said it was because of storehouses and that they're basically, the British got beat back though after they marched from Westport through Ridgefield into Danbury because they hit a storehouse of very good rum. And they got schnockered on it, and the colonists came in at night because Sybil Ludington ran out and did 40 miles of warning the British were coming. And she rounded up over maybe 400 volunteers. She did it 40 miles. Paul Revere only did 20 miles. And well, the reason being is the real reason for the burning of Still River was spy reports and, believe it or not, counterfeiting. Ever since currency became used by civilization, the birth of counterfeiting started. Making of illegal money to make it look like legal. And during that time, about the late 1700s, there was a descendant of, believe it or not, the famous Flemish Dutch painter Vermeer, who, if you've seen any of his paintings, I think there is a Vermeer painting that's listed as the most expensive painting in the world. And there's a fellow, I think his last name was a Dutch name, Rotblat. And he was the master counterfeiter of his time. They said he was flawless. They could not distinguish. And he hated the French, hated the English, hated the Spanish, hated the Germans, because they all wanted to use him or throw him in jail because he was counterfeiting for the opposite side. Well, the story goes that Ben Franklin was out and about in Europe trying to get support for the revolution with Kościuszek from Poland, General Kościuszek, a Polish general, and a bunch of other people who were against the English and the Brits. And they got a hold of the whereabouts of Mr. Rotblat. Mr. Rotblat was also a master rum maker. And he somehow, Jefferson, Alexander Hamilton, and Ben Franklin got a hold of him and made a deal, and they shipped him over. And they hid him away. And British spies were out because they got wind of this. And they heard somewhere in the backwater, in Still River, he was in hideout, counterfeiting, because the British couldn't figure out how the colonists were getting supplies, weapons, for the revolution and support. Where were they getting the money? Where were they getting the supplies? And the standard textbook answer is the rum triangle and allies. And but also they got a hold of Rupert, and they were counterfeiting flawless English money and other money to buy stuff for the revolution, and to pay mercenaries and soldiers in counterfeit British money, and they would come back and buy British stuff and send it back. And well, one day they had him underground in these tunnels. Still River, they said, had these tunnels underground where weapons, powder, and supplies was stored. Also, it's where the counterfeiter operated out of. And the British spies didn't have it exactly correct. They knew the whereabouts of him somewhere. And they also knew about supplies. So, the king sent like a contingent out to Long Island. You would think the British in force would attack like New York, Washington, or wherever, big centers, not a little backwater, a know-nothing place. And but they came in like 6 or 8 shiploads. A whole, 2 battle groups were poised to march from like Long Island to land in Westport and march to Still River to find this guy. Suppose that was the secret mission. Only the general or the generals knew about this. So this one guy who lived, there's a story, this one fellow who lived up in Still River up towards the west side of town was sent by his wife down to the south end of town where the road comes in down at the south end from Richfield and Bethel. And she sent him down to the dry goods store there to buy a bolt of velvet or fabric. And he's coming out of the store, and he looks up the road and he sees a contingent of British forces, of scouts, coming down the road. He hops on his horse and they chase him and shoot at him, but he eludes them, and he puts out the alarm. And that's like just before, after Sybil Ludington's out also, amassing a force is getting amassed to march in to stand off the British. And they get standed off out on the outskirts, but the British come in, and they can't find anything. They did find a storehouse of rum, which was like a token thing, very well-made rum, and the generals decided, well, the only thing to do to be sure is just burn the whole place to the ground. So that's what they did. They didn't look underground. And there's this little house down on the main street of Still River. It had a sign on it that said 1685 it was built. Well, that was there, and an old lady lived in there who we knew when we were kids, named Mrs. Teagarden, who was a missionary to China in her younger days, a teacher, which was really funny because we used to go over to there. She ran like a little after-school preschool for us neighborly kids, and we used to play like Mr. Potato Head and stuff, and have cookies and cider, and she was really something. But anyway, downstairs, she said there's a broken down tunnel, so that was one of the entranceways. I guess the old tunnels are all broken down, but that's where they stored powder, armament, and counterfeit money. And that's where this guy worked. He disappeared. He was never heard of again after the revolution. But they had him down there, and That's the revolutionary story of the burning of Still River. And this is Still River Radio.